Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Pivoting to Web3 podcast. And I have a very exciting guest for you. And she's a little bit different than what we've had in the past because she is interested in AI and seniors, but AI overall. But it was her background that caught my eye. I'm going to let her introduce herself. As you know, I like my guests to introduce themselves to the world. So, Lucia Dore, I would like you to say hello to all our listeners.
Hi, I'm Lucia. I'm based in New Zealand, Dunedin, New Zealand, which is on the South Island. I have lived in the UK for about 18 and a half years, and then I was in the Middle East for about 8 years, 8.5. And I was head of a newswire service, so I'm an investigative financial journalist. So I know a lot what's happening around the world and different things. I have a website which deals with the issues of the Middle East and the Pacific, disruptive technologies and financial services. But I also wrote last year, I'm focused on AI with a colleague called a book called SeniorITy, How IT and Tech Can Enhance Senior Living. And so I was interested in looking at how seniors can use tech. And, now it's slightly broader than that and the cultural issues involved with that. I mean, at the time I got into that, I was living with a lot of seniors at the time. My father was ill, so I was at the country club with him. So I was, sort of involved with a lot of seniors, and I could see how they were interacting or weren't interacting with technology because they could only see it was a bad thing.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've been very curious. Being a senior myself, at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of benefits with seniors. There's a lot of things they could do, or a lot of things that will help them write their stories and their memories, or things they wish they did, or whatever's been inside of them over the decades. For me, it seems with some of the seniors that I know, that might bring in new opportunities. Can you tell us or share with us some of that impact or observations?
The book was really based on the benefits that seniors could get from using IT, and a lot of that was involved, particularly in the health sector. The fact that everything is is all hooked up to technology, and they can determine sickness much better than before, and also day-to-day living. I mean, a lot of the time people are using technology and don't know it. For example, even fridges that open and if it's left open, there's noise. Induction ovens, the fact that they make noise if water is spilt on it. You can leave a house and it can all be could be alarmed because of AI and technology. And that's really what I was looking at. I was looking at some of the things to do with wealth, some of the different systems that could be used with wealth.
Well, tell us a little bit about that. And what kind of systems can be used with wealth? I'm sure everybody listening might want to know a little bit.
Yeah, the fact that people can go, they might want to trade, and therefore they can go online and trade shares. And they can also track the way the companies work. They can, if they are so inclined, they can go into cryptocurrency. It's not my thing at all, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, but it's something that may interest them and the ins and outs of that. And that's very much technology that's based on AI. So if once people are conversant with a computer and getting around it, there are many things that they can do to ensure that they're checking. They can also do remote, if they want to do any remote work, for example, remote tutoring or something like that. They could do it. They don't have to leave their homes. They can do it. I looked at online banking. which is a huge benefit for seniors because they can get everything paid into their account automatically. They can do everything automatically without leaving their homes. Now, what was interesting was because my mother, who was about 80, she absolutely refused anything to do with technology, and she would still go into a bank to deposit.
So let me ask you something.
To deposit money, which seemed, my father was exactly the opposite, and he was 87, and he would do everything online.
So with that said, you mentioned everything about being online, which we've been doing over the last few decades. Everything's online, or you may have an app on your phone. But when we talk about AI and the seniors, I'm kind of curious on how does the AI really change things or moves it forward in a different way with the systems and emerging technologies that you mentioned?
Well, I don't know that AI has changed too much in banking, but it certainly has a technology as well. But AI has helped in some financial services. I have given some examples of that in banks in terms of queuing. For example, they can determine how old you are from your voice, or I don't know where you're calling from. They can work it out, and therefore you can be further up in the queue.
Oh, really?
So you don't have to wait as long. Yeah. So
Oh,
they
okay.
can do
So the call
things like
distribution
that.
system is using AI now.
Yeah.
Oh, now that's
So it
a little bit different.
can a number of companies are using it, right across the board, corporates. And I've forgotten the company name, but there is a queuing, you can be moved up the queuing system, and that can happen in banks. The fact that banks use AI, I suppose, for with voice recognition, the fact that you can call up and you can identify yourself by using voice rather than anything else makes it easier as well. You don't have to push a lot of buttons anymore, and people
That's
don't like
true.
pushing buttons.
Well, with your travels and everything and your research with your book, what would you say that you have learned that really surprised you about your research with AI and seniors or other populations? And the AI
Well,
in general, what surprised you?
I think the biggest thing was the cultural issues. The fact that people think of technology and AI very differently in different countries.
Oh,
And there is a research institute in France who's looking at that. You could say because AI is a programmed, and is programmed generally by white men. So in the Western world, what happens if you're Eastern world and you might want different answers, you might see different things, what the fact that Indigenous people may have a different view of what technology can do for them, and it's not programmed for that. So there are quite a lot of issues. I was quite interested by that. And the person who was involved, who has put together an institute in France, he had been in the Air Force, I think the French Air Force. And he said it was really noticeable for him in different countries, the way they use technology, because they wanted different outcomes.
well, that does remind me of a conversation that I had recently about ethics and morals and biases with AI. So you're really adding on the what nobody's really saying out loud, who's really feeding the AI and why we get the outcomes that we do.
Yeah,
So
well, we get the outcomes because of the people. It's inherently biased. And I suppose if somebody wants to have a certain outcome, they can put in certain inputs.
so while you were traveling and everything that you learned from that experience with the gentleman in France and the biases, ethics, morals, governance, where do you see it really going? Where do you see your perspective really
I think
going to in
there's
the future?
I think there's a long way to go before we can embrace entire populations. At the moment, people are talking about Chat GPT, but that is really machine learning. It's dragging everything up from the internet. And then we have to still put our view on that. We still have to know what's right and what's wrong, what's correct and what's not. It's not all correct because all they're getting are dragging up everything from the internet. And I think that's what has to change. So I think it'll be a long way before there are robots that can deal with different cultures. At the moment, there are certain outcomes and they achieve that. But we need new people that are involved. I don't think a lot of people necessarily are, but I think that we talk about generative AI now, but I think it'll be a long time before the movements of people can be really emulated. And I think that they need to really look at a lot of the cultural issues before they can go forward.
So I don't know if that's really going to stop AI or not. And it's not my place to really express my opinion on that point. But in the financial world, where you've done a lot of work, got a great experience at that financial piece, what do you see changing in that space? I know they have DeFinance and they're using AI in a lot of different sectors. Do you have any insight on what's taking place on the financial side only?
Yeah, they are doing more on, particularly the Middle East. In fact, they're trying to create a hub for technology. And what they're doing are creating companies that can tap into the technology to make it easier for the consumers in terms of banking, in terms of being able, whether it's right or wrong, they determine through AI who can get loans and who can't, who is financially sound and who's not. Now, you can question, is that right? Should a robot be, or, AI, should a chatbot be determining that rather than a personal interaction? So a lot of people saying, we should go back to the old times, but I think it's gone too far forward. There's a lot of technology that's being done to try and disrupt financial services, particularly in Asia Pacific, where it's also growing very quickly because they're adopting a lot of new technology from China. Singapore's quite ahead in adopting just bringing in companies that are trying to bring new energy to financial services and make it easier for consumers overall, whether a lot of it's in trading. In trading, it often goes back to Bitcoin or the cryptocurrencies, but it's developing that and making them more accessible to the consumer and more understandable. At the moment, I don't think any of it's very understandable. So that's where it's really at. I think I was reading that in Asia Pacific, there is growth of about 23% or something, might be more in Asia Pacific, and disruptive technologies and financial services, or looking at AI and the different approaches they could take. The companies are being funded heavily by the VCs on that.
So that was quite a bit of information on what's happening over in Asia Pacific. What about governance? Have any insight on what's happening with governance? Are some of the countries moving faster than other beyond Asia Pacific? Anybody in Europe or
I think in Europe and the United States, they are probably looking at governance more quickly. I think governance will have to come from something like WHO or some international organization. The trade organizations, perhaps, because of the trade. But at the moment, I don't think each country is looking like the governance in New Zealand, the governance in the UK. It's all individual, but I think there needs to be some international organization who looks at that, probably from the United Nations.
So you mentioned your book a little bit earlier. I want to go back to that. How did you go about realizing that you wanted to do something in seniority with seniors? How did you really come into that topic, AI, but bringing it in the forefront of seniors? You're the first one that I have met that's really focused on the senior piece or doing something in that arena.
Well, what we were looking at seniors very generally. I mean, and at the moment, there are a lot of, with seniors fall or age, organizations that deal with seniors, playing, how they interact, lonely. But there wasn't anybody who was specifically looking at IT that we could identify. They would look at that as a component of something else.
Right.
And we thought, well, it's growing so quickly, and we really want to know what's happening on both with IT and AI, that we would look at that. I had actually also been dealing with AI in journalism in the Middle East with one of the officers. I was still in New Zealand, but I was working with an officer on journalism, etc. So I learned quite a lot about that. And I thought, well, it should be expanded out to look at how seniors interact. And at the time, I was also living in a retirement village with my father, and I could see how some people were really taking to technology and some weren't. Some wouldn't even touch it. And yet they use it all the time, but they don't want to acknowledge that technology is very much part of their lives. And so as a consequence of all that, and my colleague who was dyslexic and was using technology to make it easier for her, we hit upon tech. We thought, well, technology is the way forward.
So with the AI, you were in the journalism space. And you mentioned that you learned a lot about the AI in journalism. How are they utilizing AI in the journalism media space right now?
In newsrooms, people think, oh, our job's going to be taken away, but it's not as simple as that. In newsrooms, they're being used to perhaps sort out press releases, to do the more mundane tasks they can get AI to do. And journalists, and they can have fewer of them, can focus on more important tasks. They can go out, they can interview people. So they're freed up from the day-to-day tasks. And so there is more focus on that. Particularly, there is a unit looking at AI and journalism from the London School of Economics. And they look at that specifically about the development of AI. It was used more probably just by people in writing their stories, in the fact that they can write stories more quickly, they can get information more quickly, and then they can make it their own.
And that's the exciting piece.
Areas, yeah. So it's not all bad by any,
it's not.
I think there are ways. It's the way we want to use the technology, rather than what the technology is. If it's used badly, yes, it can be bad, but it can have good outcomes if it's used well.
I say that all the time. There's good and bad actors in every space, and there's a lot to be said on the positive side for Web3, AI, and the emerging technologies. So going forward, I know you have the book, you've done a lot of traveling. What are some last insights that you want to share with us before we close and tell us how people can reach out to you?
Well, I'm working with somebody in Australia now who is an expert on AI, and we've been writing about the cultural biases and different things. I've in fact got a Learn Business English course, and AI, I'll write a module on that, looking at how AI can be used in business. And only yesterday, something came through from Harvard Business School about the efficiency that businesses were generating because of AI. And I think that's what we have to remember, that AI can be beneficial and it isn't all bad. And you can get hold of me. Generally, I have my own website as well as Behavioral Shift and other ones, but it's Lucia. Oh, no, I've forgotten. It's Lucia Dore.co.nz.
Say that again. Say that one more time.
Lucia, LUCIADORE.co.nz. And then it has the other websites and has some AI on that one as well.
And everyone listening, if you didn't catch that, it will be on Pivoting to Web3 podcast. Of course, as you know, our guests have a page that has all their contact information and a nice summary with the show notes. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening to Pivoting to Web3 with Lucia Dore. And I look forward to seeing you, chatting with you, and continuing to shape tomorrow together. Till next time. Thanks for listening to Pivoting to Web3 at pivotingtoweb3.com. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so that it gets to you with every episode that comes out. We have lots of great opportunities, limitations, and downward spirals being revealed by our guests. And thank you in advance for all your reviews and comments. I appreciate you so much. I look forward to serving you in the next week's episode.